Hey, everybody, welcome to today's podcast. This, of course, being the Concealed Carry podcast. And you know what? If you're wondering where you can find the Concealed Carry podcast and go back and see all of our past episodes, you can go to podcast.concealedcarry.com. Or you can just go to concealedcarry.com if you can't remember that and navigate to podcasts. It should be on there somewhere. Today's topic is getting back to the range after a long break because of things like coronavirus and ranges being closed and stuff.
Right.
This is Matthew's idea, and it's a good topic.
Yeah, I think it's cool. It's some things we'll talk about that's kind of got my mind thinking about this, but we'll save that for the content.
For sure, man, for sure. Hey, Cammie, first one to join, or at least comment on Facebook. Thanks for being here.
Oh, Cammie's normally on YouTube lately. She's back on Facebook.
Boy, she's mixing it up, trying to keep us on our toes. Hey, Chrissy. Bobby, hello, buddy. Nice to have you. Matthew has a hard stop in 52 minutes, so we are going to we're going to get into it here in just a moment. So we may have a few more that join us once we actually begin the recorded portion of the show. And yeah, hopefully everybody's doing well. What is a range? Yes, good question. Very insightful. Can be defined as many things.
You can cook food in it, right?
Getting back to the range. Well, the cows are looking forward to getting back to the range.
Home on the range.
You know, this is probably a foreign concept to some of you Easterners, but or Midwesterners even to some degree. But out here in the West, you know, we have all this public land, BLM land, even the Forest Service, you know, in places as far as where there are essentially permits or long-term leases that farmers and ranchers are able to get, and then they lease big plots of public land, you know, with certain guidelines and regulations in place. They're able to, you know, take their cows from where they normally keep them at home, wherever home is, and take them up to the mountains or out to the desert or whatever it is. So, yeah. That sort of thing is going on probably right now somewhere.
Yeah, for sure.
I got family and friends that are in the ranching business. And anywho, all right, let's kick it off. It is 10 after the hour, and we do have a few more joining us. Again, today's topic: getting back to the range after a long break. Bring your questions too. We'll try to keep an eye on things in the chat here. Let's do it. Give me a countdown, Matthew.
3, 2, 1.
That's too fast. It's got to be like 1 second. I'm just kidding.
So particular.
This is the Concealed Carry Podcast, episode number 416. And welcome to the Concealed Carry Podcast, part of the concealedcarry.com network. I am your host, Riley Bowman, and I'm joined by producer extraordinaire, Master Chief, Matthew Maruster.
What's up, guys? Glad to be here once again.
And he was not a Master Chief in the military, in the Marines, but he was pretty awesome nonetheless. Weren't you?
I don't know.
All right, so today's episode, guys, we're talking about getting back to the range, particularly after a break, which many of us have had forced upon us with coronavirus, social distancing guidelines, ranges being closed or shut down, things going back and forth and left and right. I mean, we had a local indoor range here, Matthew, that reopened after they were given social distancing guidelines, and then they were shut down again because apparently the county decided to change rules again, or who knows what. And they got back open, I heard just the other day. So craziness with all of this. So, you know, I had to take a break from the range there because the one I frequent the most was not available. Did you have to do something similar?
Oh, yeah. We went through the same exact process as you were saying. It was closed, and then it was sort of open, and then they said they threatened us with, you know, legal action because we were going to reopen, and it got closed again, and then it got reopened. So, yeah.
Yep. So what to do when you've had a break and you haven't been able to go and shoot and practice or train. that's the topic of today's episode, and I'm looking forward to discussing it with you, Matthew. We're going to give you guys some tips, some suggestions, we're going to talk about practice plans and how to warm up properly, maybe some drills and things you might want to do or run or test yourself on. What skills are the most perishable, and maybe that should be an area that we might want to consider focusing. Matthew's got some thoughts on safety and things like that that I think is also really important and relevant as well. But first, today's episode is brought to you by Mountain Man Medical, which you can find at mountainmanmedical.com. That is our source for good, quality, and affordable, very reasonably priced trauma kits and other medical trauma-type supplies. mountainmanmedical.com. And actually, we're going to have Brian, who is our medical expert, as a former corpsman in the Navy and having worked in ERs and stuff like that. Brian heads up a lot of our efforts at Mountain Man Medical, and he will be with us on Tuesday to bring us a special announcement. Actually, he's going to tease us and give us a preview of some things to come on the newly launched Mountain Man Medical YouTube channel. So we look forward to having Brian with us on Tuesday. Today's episode also sponsored by, and this is more of a, they're not actually, I should be clear, they're not officially a sponsor of the episode, although we have a very close working relationship with Mantis. They don't have to be a sponsor when we sell their product, and we make, a little money off of it, and we appreciate those of you that support us and them. And so we sell Mantis X in our store, and Mantis X, I think, is a hugely valuable tool, particularly with today's topic in mind, Matthew, getting back to the range after being away for a time. There may be some things that have crept up on you skill-wise that you might not have noticed, but Mantis X can help you discover some of those deficiencies, particularly in your trigger work and grip work and stuff like that. And I think that's a huge help for somebody that's just getting back to the range and trying to get things going again. And of course, it's a hugely valuable training tool in dry fire as well. So check out Mantis X at concealedcarry.com/Mantis X, MANTISX. That will take you to a page for the Mantis X Classic edition, but you can navigate on the site there and find the other Mantis products, because we sell also I think we got the X2 on there now, the X3, and the X10, all available for sale on the concealedcarry.com store. So, Matthew, getting back to the range after being away for a time, after a break. You actually, you proposed this idea, and I know where your thought process was going with this, because there was an incident at your range just yesterday.
Yeah, it was crazy. So to give you just a little context, I held a private class yesterday in the morning, and so we have a training range at the range, but this is a big fishing game. So there's an open range. They have a couple pistol ranges and a rifle range and shotgun, all kinds of stuff over there. But we have our own private range. We did our thing, and I took off. I left. I head back home. And about an hour or two later, I get a call from one of the guys that works up at the range. He says, "Hey, somebody just got shot up here." And I said, "Well, that's interesting. I need to know," right? And so he tells me this is what happened. So a lot of people, the range just opened back to the public maybe 3 or 4 days ago. And since this time, he said that the range has been packed. Like, people have been coming there, and there's no reservations. It's outdoor, so people get up there, and you have to shut down the range to go down range and pace up your targets and stuff. So people are doing that and being safe and all that. And there's this one guy who's been a member there for quite a while. He's a nurse. He's been working healthcare and all this stuff and working really hard, but he's been going up to the range since it's opened nearly every day. And so he tells me that this guy has his rifle that he's been shooting. He puts it in a case and closes the case, and the case is oriented perpendicular to the firing line, as you would think that, you're putting your gun away that way rather than the muzzle being downrange, how it should be. Mm-hmm. As he closes the case, and the case was a hard case. It was filled with foam. I don't know all the particulars outside of you might have some questions like, was there anything else in the case? And I asked this like magazines or locks or boxes of ammunition or anything, or was it just the gun? He didn't really know, but he knew it was a foam inserted case. He closes the lid of the case. The gun fires. The rifle fires.
And like you said, it is sideways, to
yes.
like like you said, perpendicular to the downrange area.
Right, and it is like the line is packed, right? The line is packed, and unfortunately, it ends up striking. The round strikes somebody who was standing right next to him, and the rifle it's chambered in 303 British, which I'm not really familiar with that, but I believe it's it's.
It's comparable to a 30-06. It's
right.
probably a little bit, a little bit lighter in power, but not by much.
Right, but the projectile is still a pretty beefy projectile.
It's 30 caliber, man. I mean, it's right. it is literally like it's 303 as opposed to say 308. But yeah, right. It's 30 caliber. It's going to leave a mark.
And this is at like maybe 8 feet at most.
Dang.
So yeah, and it strikes this guy in the upper thigh. And yeah, luckily, thankfully, the round didn't strike his femoral artery, but it did do quite a bit of damage. And so they called paramedics. Paramedics got there, took him out, and then they ended up having to life flight him. What I asked, initially was, did he have medical gear, or was there medical gear on the line? And the range, the open range, and probably like many of the ranges you guys go to, if they're outdoor clubs or ranges and things like that, they may have a range trauma kit somewhere on the range. It might be on the line, it might be back at the RSO shed or something like that. Well, there was a trauma kit, but it wasn't up on the range, and the RSO was not in the shed. He was walking the line, and it's a big area, and so by the time he would have gotten back to there, grabbed the kit and got back up there, at least a minute would have had to pass. Luckily, somebody had a tourniquet on the line, as far as I know. I don't know if it was the individual who got shot or the one who shot him, but they applied a tourniquet, which controlled some of the bleeding. And, who knows if it saved his life? I don't know. I don't have any particular, information after that as far as the damage or what all happened and who applied it. I'll get more information as, we find out a little bit more. It just happened yesterday. But it got me thinking, because we talk about this a lot, Riley. I mean, and we comment on posts, and I see a lot of people that say, I don't need trauma gear because my range has it. There's a range kit, or I have what I need in my truck or whatever. And this is one of those things where you can't put your safety in somebody else's hands. If you have you're counting on that trauma kit that the range has. I mean, think of all the hands that have gone through there. Maybe a piece of gear is gonna be there that you need, or maybe it won't, or maybe it's damaged, or it's expired if it's a quick clot type material or something like that. So, or it's it's just not, it's a bogus tourniquet, right? Maybe the range bought a bogus tourniquet, a knockoff tourniquet. So, and stuff like this, I mean, this is your life, and you don't know if people will say, well, I'm safe. I've never had a discharge. I've been shooting guns my whole life. Well, it might not be you that does, that makes the mistake. It's the guy standing next to you. And so I have a feeling that this might have been caused. I mean, they said he was a nurse and he had been working. So it might have been a situation where he had been overworked, working really hard, just getting back out to the range, and a lot of things on your mind, and you're kind of a little rusty with your mechanics or whatnot. And you take a quick little, you turn off your brain for a second. And a mistake like that's happens.
And that's key, what you said right there, turning off the brain. Anytime we're handling a firearm, in fact, we rewrote the safety rules for our purposes at concealedcarry.com in the classes I teach. I mean, they're very similar, right? But there's some wording that was changed, and that was something I felt really important, or felt was really important, and because of what I wanted to communicate to my students when I'm teaching them about firearm safety in a class and on the range. And rule number two, right, which normally is read something along the lines of, always keep the muzzle of your gun pointed in a safe direction or something to that effect, right? The way we rewrote it is always be attentive when handling a firearm and know where the muzzle is pointing. Because I inherently believe that nobody intentionally, wants, unlike except for when they're, committing murder, right? But nobody intentionally thinks, "Oh, I'm going to point this muzzle at this person." They do stuff like that because they forget what they're doing. The brain switches off. They are no longer being attentive and paying attention to what they're doing with that firearm in that moment. So it's not that they don't understand that the gun's dangerous. It's that they don't or that they have forgotten what they're doing with it. They are not paying attention. So it's that attentiveness piece that I think is so key.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And some of the comments, who puts their rifle away loaded. He does. I mean, I'm sure he doesn't normally do this, and that's that key, right? Like this is a lapse in judgment where he maybe thought he cleared it and he didn't. And it just
Right.
takes it just takes that one quick second to be talking to the guy next to you or thinking about something else. Like, somebody calls you, "Hey, I got to get home, so I'm trying to put my stuff away really quick." And I liked what you said about the safety piece in the classes yesterday. When we first started that, and this is a guy who he's a good shooter. The guy I had a private class with, right? He shoots a lot, and the first thing I did was have him unload his gun, and we went through some dry fire stuff. And it's not because I didn't trust him or that I didn't think that he was a capable shooter. It's just because I don't know the last time he actually put rounds down range. He told me he'd been to the range a couple times, but it hadn't been for a couple months. And I was like, all right, well, let's get back into handling the gun and getting the gun in your hand before we just start cranking rounds around, right? Like let's go through that basic, fundamental stuff of getting back with the gun in your hand and racking the slide and holstering and unholstering and doing that stuff. He said he was dry firing, but
Yep.
nothing replicates, live fire. You can get away with a mistake in dry fire, but you can't in live fire. So we started dry fire, myself as well. We got out
Yep.
there and I unloaded my gun. So I think that's one thing to maybe think about when you get back out to the range if you haven't, or just start that, work out all those kinks, right? That with dry fire without the gun loaded before you just jump in and start drawing from the holster and doing kinds of time drills and cold start drills and stuff like that.
Yep. Yeah, dude, I'm a big believer that firearm safety is also a perishable
Sure.
skill almost. I mean, I think firearm safety is learned. It has to be learned. It is something that and the reason I believe that is because of my interactions with so many people and students and other instructors even over the years, where you know that they know or that they've been taught the safety rules, but yet then you watch them handle the gun and you're like, dude, you haven't handled a gun in a while. There's something inherently tied, or it ties safety with really knowing what you're doing as you are handling and manipulating a firearm. I think, some of it I think is almost a confidence thing, because what we see sometimes is people with lackadaisical attitudes, like just the manner in which they handle the firearm. And I see that more in somebody that hasn't been doing it as much or hasn't done it in a long time, or recently, or frequently, So, yeah, this is a great point. Now, the other big lesson from your story, Matthew, is, and again, we're talking about getting back to the range, and the reason I started with this is because this is a great reminder to us all of how important it is. We can't let our brains go out the window. We got to stay focused on the task at hand when we're handling dangerous tools like a firearm. And I think it's easier potentially, and I'm not saying that's necessarily we don't know what happened for sure in this instance, but I think it's easier that someone could make a mistake like this when they haven't been, again, like I just said, spending as much time around their guns in recent history. But the other big thing, how critical is it to have quality trauma gear? You know, a basic IFAC, having it right there with you could be the difference maker between life and death, and could have been in this case. I mean, it sounds like fortunately there was somebody there with a tourniquet ready, and fortunately this dude didn't get struck in the artery. He's very, 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 very lucky. But still, that tourniquet, it was handy to, even it's not a bad idea sometimes to even just proactively, especially when you know somebody's going to get immediate medical care, like they're within 30 minutes or even an hour of a hospital. It's not a bad idea sometimes to proactively just go ahead and get that tourniquet on. There's going to be probably quite a bit of blood and tissue and just stuff, especially being shot by a 30 caliber bullet. So, rather than wasting time trying to decide, do I need a tourniquet or not? If you're in doubt, just use the tool. And we sell tourniquets at mountainmedical.com. Counterfeit, directly supplied from North American Rescue, the Cat Gen 7 tourniquet. That's what I recommend for sure. Yep. Okay, let's get into some other lessons, though, and other tips and suggestions for getting back to the range after a long break. And I thank you so much for sharing that experience, sure. Matthew. You know, when you shared that with our team internally here yesterday, I was just like, whoa, dang. I mean, you weren't there, obviously, at the time, but just knowing that happened a short time later after you left the range, boy, that's a wake-up call, knowing it's that close to home. Sure. And we all know we could have been that, either the guy that made that mistake, because his brain switched off there for a moment, or we could be the guy in the next lane over that gets shot. Mm-hmm. Which is why I'm dialed in. I'm paying attention to other people and what they're doing when I'm at the range.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm actually more anxious when I'm at an indoor range that has the walls that are not glass, that you can't see through. Yeah. And a lot of times those side walls are ballistically protected, but they're not always. Depends on the range. It'd be a good question to ask if you want to know at your range, or if you're seeking out ranges. It'd be a good thing to ask, because I find that's a nice little extra layer of protection from those people on the sides. But even that ballistic protection may not stop around like a 30-06 or 308 or 223. I do like those ranges, though, where you got the ballistic class. Even though it's nice to have the privacy sometimes, I like being able to keep my eyes on other people and be like, what are you doing, bro? What are you doing,
We've all seen those videos of what people do in those indoor shooting ranges, checking the laser with their hand in front of it, or taking selfies and all kinds of crazy stuff.
Yep. And Matthew on Facebook here has a great comment. Not Matthew that's on the podcast with us, but he says overconfidence kills safety, procedures, and fundamentals the most. And I agree. Overconfidence is deadly, and overconfidence leads to us sometimes not to kind of check out from, again, those really important things that we're doing as we're handling that firearm. Okay, so other things. Here was my thought, Matthew, when we started talking about this topic in preparation for today's episode. I was thinking, okay, what would be the most perishable skills relating to shooting when I've had a break? And let's actually even make the assumption, because there's definitely some things that if you've been doing a lot of regular dry fire practice during this break, I've been doing some myself, let's just assume you haven't. Okay, so because dry fire would help keep some things in check, right? But not everything. So let's assume you just take a break from shooting for a while. How would you get back into things, and maybe where would you spend the most time? What's your kind of your 80-20, the Pareto principle? What's going to perish the fastest, the quickest, and where am I going to get my biggest bang for the buck, pun intended? When I'm getting back to the range, I want to make sure I get back up to speed in relatively quick order. And so I'm actually going to start by answering that with more of a procedural thing when we go to the range. I believe in doing some sort of warm-up when I'm at the range. But I also believe in testing myself when I am most cold, right? So it used to be that I'd go to the range and I would immediately jump right into a warm up, like say a dot torture drill, 50 shots. It's a great drill. It's challenging. It's great for a warm up. It really puts me in a good place, focus wise, mentally. When I'm looking to get a good range session in. But in the last year or so, I've started getting to where I like to test certain skills cold, because that's honestly that's our best measurement. And I think I talked about this. It feels like I talked about this recently. That's my best measurement, is when so when it's best to test yourself is when you're cold, because that's the performance that really matters. You would carry a gun for personal defense. Well, the day you have to use it in defense, you're going to be cold. So that, knowing where you are cold, not warmed up, is a better reflection of where am I at currently. So my range sessions, like these days, go like this. I show up and I will test myself, sometimes on just one thing, sometimes it's multiple things. Now, knowing if you've been away from the range for a while, it wouldn't be a bad idea to test yourself on multiple things. Now, what do I mean by that? Drills and tests and things are I think, best when they more or less isolate certain aspects of shooting. Right? Because that gives us, the best feedback of, well, I can tell that I'm weak in one of, these following areas. The test that I start with always now when I go to the range, and I don't know if this will be the case forever, but I like it, and it's a great test. And I do the Jack Wilson drill, or Jack Wilson test, as I'm actually starting to call it more now, because it is just that. I mean, Jack Wilson, famous name now amongst our followers and our community, because what he did was pretty remarkable, right? Cold from the holster, recognizing a threat that needed to be stopped immediately. That threat, which was turning its shotgun towards the front of the chapel or sanctuary, about to maybe shoot the pastor and or reverend, or I don't know what we call it. I don't know that much about that particular church and its organization, right? So Jack Wilson sees that, draws his gun, drops him with a single headshot, right? Mm-hmm. That's the test I begin with now all the time, because I want to know, because I could just start straight. I could go right into, say, a bill drill, which I used to do all the time as a cold test, and I still do, because that's also, I think, a pretty good representation of a lot of self-defense encounters. Relatively close distance. I mean, it's 7 yards, multiple shot string. So you got to, what are you demonstrating when you can successfully shoot a bill drill? You're demonstrating control of your weapon, that you have what it takes to draw, get that gun out and on target quickly, in a fast time frame, a standard of time, and then that you can put accurate shots on that target again and again and again and again, and not have recoil pushing you around, not having your grip break down, that kind of stuff. And so bill drill is great, and I'm going to come back to that. But now I start with the Jack Wilson test, because it frankly is, it's one shot, and it's not maybe the most thrilling thing in the world, but it's not an easy thing to do. My personal standard is to do it in under 2 seconds. The official standard, as I've created it, when I use it, and we just used it in a church security team class a couple weeks back that I taught, is you got to do it in under 3 seconds. Okay. That is the standard. Now, for me personally, I try to do it always under 2, because why not push myself, right? And I succeed, about 85, 90% of the time. I'm trying to get to where I could succeed. I mean, 100% is great, right? But I'm always pushing myself, right? And riding that edge at about 90% success rate is that constantly means I'm pushing myself. So anyway, Jack Wilson test. That's the first thing I do. Then I may, again, follow that with a few other tests or drills. Bill drill is a big one, and I already kind of touched on that. 6 shots, 7 yards on an 8-inch circle target, like a IDPA down 0 target area or USPSA metric IPSC target 6 by 11 inch rectangle. Either one of those hit areas, that's fine. It's good enough standard. If you want to push yourself on that, you want to try to keep everything in a 6-inch or a 5-inch circle, that's cool too. For me though, I'll shoot a build drill cold, and I want to get 6 shots on that target. I want to do it in under 2 seconds if I can, but that's a really, really, really high standard. Most of the time when I'm cold, I shoot a build drill in about 2.15, 2.2. And I'll take that. That's respectable. It still shows and demonstrates, good control. The big thing is I'm looking for cleanness in my hits. I want to know that I got all 6 hits. When I drop one of them, if it's close, I'll be like, okay. If it's a wide miss, then I get a little bit frustrated. And that tells me at some point during that string of fire, I lost control, right? The grip broke down. Something broke down a little bit, okay? Here's another really good test to run, I think, cold, and gives a really good kind of a more broad baseline of where a shooter is at. And that is the 5x5 skills test, as designed by Bill Wilson, and is now also used as an abbreviated qualification or classification or classifier, abbreviated classifier for IDPA. What's the 5x5? Well, the 5x5 is, first stage is you draw and you fire 5 shots, and it's done on an IDPA target, typically 8-inch hit area, and then you also need a 4-inch circle area for the headshot. So first stage, draw, fire 5 shots, get that all in the body. Second stage, draw and fire 5 shots one-handed only, so your normal dominant shooting hand. Third stage, draw. So again, that implies the first stage was 2-handed, right? It actually just says freestyle. If you could do one-handed 2 times if you wanted, it doesn't really matter. Obviously, 2-handed is a little bit easier. Third stage is freestyle again. So your choice. Most likely, people are going to go 2-handed, right? Draw, put 5 rounds on the body, perform a slide lock reload. Right, slide locks back after those 5 rounds. Works really great if you start this drill off with 15 rounds in a mag. So you go 5, and you go 5, and then you go 5 more. Gun locks back. You reload. Put 5 more rounds into the body of the target. And then the final stage, the fourth stage, is you draw. You put 4 in the body, 1 in the head. That 4-inch circle in the head. Okay, and I would say comparably a 3x5 card area is acceptable as well. It's representational enough, but 4-inch circle is the standard. Now, what is it? So then what do you do? All right, so you take all those times, all of those hits, and you want to take all the times and add them all up all together and get a composite, total gross time for those 4 stages of those 4 courses of fire. And then, or strings of fire, and then you're going to add any penalties. And penalties are any misses anywhere are add 1 more second. It used to be, I think, that they said add ½ second. Now I think the standard is you add 1 second. So, and then you get your total score, and it's a time score. And you then can compare that to well-known standards, and it's basically, and I'm not going to go through and list what all them that they are. You can go look it up. Go look up 5x5 skills test, and you can also look at the IDPA classifier scores. They split that up and break that down into, well, if it's this time, then you're a master class shooter, and so on and so forth. But my goal, cold, is to absolutely for sure do that all in 20 seconds or less. I really like to be around 18. Really doing well is 15 seconds or less. But I rarely could, I don't think I've ever actually done it 15 seconds or less cold. So I really, this is just me personally. And that's a really good standard, by the way. That actually, in a lot of divisions in IDPA, classifies as a master class run. All right. So those are 3 tests. Now, in lieu of the build drill, I may just run I may just do Jack Wilson and a 5x5 skills test. Because the 5x5 is doing a lot of the same stuff that the build drill is doing. But the reason why I like the 5x5 is because you get kind of that build drill feel, but it's mixing in a few other things, including reloads, one-handed shooting only, which that sometimes comes in. That's a relevant thing in defensive shootings, and also mixes in a precision shot of to the head. And by the way, I forgot to mention this is all done from 10 yards, right? So it's a really good mix, and you can look at each of those different strings of fire and go, okay, where am I lacking the most? And what you're going to find is your grip may be suffering. You may not be as focused on your sight pictures, what you need to be to make some of those shots. You may find out that your trigger work is really sloppy, and you'll see that with some classic low left shots in the case of right hand shooters, or on that headshot. That's a little bit more of a difficult shot to make, and you may push that one out of that circle. So that I think is a really well-rounded test. Now I just spent a lot of time describing all that, but I did it with a purpose, because I would encourage everybody listening here, like, start with something like that, cold, because that tells you where you are, and then that can help guide what you're going to spend the rest of your time working on. Now, it's not a bad idea to already have a plan, and you may already have a sense, well, I'm probably going to need to work on these things when I go to the range next. So that would be a couple things I would do cold before I even consider doing a so-called warm-up. Now, you might even consider doing, because if you do Jack Wilson, follow it up with a 5x5 skills test. That's 25 rounds of 5x5. That may serve as a warm-up. Or you may want to still go ahead and do something. And it's not a bad idea to do some slower fire stuff where you're really focused on the actual fundamentals of shooting a pistol. So maybe following up the 5x5 skills test and doing some B8 target, just trying to shoot for precision and show and demonstrate that you have what it takes to still work that trigger smoothly, to not anticipate, to not flinch, that sort of stuff. That's typically a routine that I follow these days. So I apologize for taking all that time. Throw it back to you, Matthew, to get your input, or also to lead us into the next thing.
No, I think you hit on a lot of good points. I mean, when you go to the range, if you're always going to be better, and you're always going to get better results if you have a plan, if you have some sort of strategy of, let me analyze and see where I am and what I can work on, right? And tailor it to specific skill sets that might have perished more or might have worn down a little bit more than others. One thing that I noticed is that, if you haven't been, if you've been kind of stuck dry firing for a long time, right? Let's say, for instance, there's some sort of global pandemic and everything's shut down, and there's government overreach all over, and they shut everything down. You can't go to the range. Not going to happen, but let's say it does. And you can't get to the range for a while. So you spend a lot of time dry firing, and you're doing, you're using LASR, and you're using this and that. One thing that you can still kind of keep your fundamentals of, how do my sights look and my sight picture, and maybe working the trigger a little bit. But what I find is that your grip, because your grip may lack in when you shoot like that bill drill initially. Because in dry fire, using LSR and stuff, you can get away with running a bill drill with a weaker grip, or not ideal grip, right? Because the recoil isn't moving that gun around in your hand. But once you get out on the range, if you don't establish that good grip right away, it's definitely going to show. So it's like one of those things that, that live fire will kind of expose just that little bit of weakness in your grip that you kind of been slacking off, maybe getting away with, maybe doing your draw to one shot, and you get that first shot off, but you have kind of a funky grip. It's not a great grip, but you still get a good time. So you're like, pat yourself on the back type thing. So I think that's might be something to start with. Like, if you get back and you're trying to run those bill drills and stuff, and you're like, man, my times are really low, or really high. I must just be, really rusty. Maybe just focus on those little fundamental type things, like, hey, how am I gripping the gun? Is my grip kind of a little, am I slacking off just a bit on that, or am I really seeing my sights the way I should be? Those are the types of things that I think get covered up in dry fire a little bit.
It's a really great point. And actually, that's one of the reasons why I'm a big proponent when doing dry fire, that to grip with pretty much the same grip pressure as you do during live fire. Mm-hmm. And the tendency is to get a little bit lax about your dry fire, and because you recognize that the gun's not going bang and it's not moving, unless you're using something like Cool Fire Trainer, right? Which we've talked about before, and I've done demonstrations on Shop Talk with and stuff. But obviously, because that is actually cycling the gun, but most of the time, and I'll be honest, a lot of my dry fire work is, even though I have a Cool Fire, I'm not using it all the time. I'm still doing a ton of dry fire work with just my normal gun, making it safe. I usually put a barrel block in it just because that's a good idea to, it's a valuable tool to have for that purpose. But yeah, it's really easy to relax on things like grip and stuff during dry fire. So I was having a conversation with somebody recently online. They were asking some question, or there was some debate about something, and I responded with, no, I know what it was. I posted a video actually, and just showing me, doing dry fire work, working on reloads, because my reloads, frankly, have never been all that awesome. They're not bad. They're just not that awesome. And, and lately they probably slacked a little bit. So I posted that video, and the dude's like, just somebody, and he's just trying to be helpful. He's like, hey, maybe you should relax a little bit. Cause I mean, you could tell I'm flexing, right? Muscles and things are and veins are popping, things are, not that I'm like, that crazy, but and I don't look the biggest upper body, as I probably could be, but having swung hammers and stuff for as many years as I have, I got really tight forearms. So yeah, I mean, he sees that and he's like, dude, maybe relax a little bit. And I'm like, no, I use the same grip when I'm doing dry fire as I do when I'm doing live fire. For this reason, I mean, there's other reasons, but this is a big one right here where you just mentioned that.
Yeah.
Ben on Facebook, Riley smash. Ugh, ugh.
You're all hulking out.
Yeah, dude, that's really good stuff. Okay, so here's, a lot of what I said is good advice for anybody, anytime, regardless of if you had a long break for the range or not. The reason I wanted to, this is a good opportunity to talk about that stuff today, because doing this kind of stuff and doing it cold, where you've been away for a while, that's probably going to be a wake-up call for a lot of people. And that's why I think it has a lot of relevance today. Now, again, what do we want to pull out of that? We want to pull out of that, what are my biggest weaknesses right now? What has perished the most? And so, having a combination of things where we're being asked to make precise shots, we either make those or we don't, combined with making quicker strings of fire. What I'm looking for is, am I getting my grip? Am I establishing that grip? Is my trigger work doing the job of pressing the trigger and the gun not moving when I'm doing that? And am I seeing my sights, seeing what I need to see relative to my sights on target, so that I know when the sights are there, right? And not shooting when I don't have the sight picture that I need, right? Those are probably the three biggest things for me. The other day I was I got to the range finally, a week or so or two ago, and I shot. I like doing lately these B8, basically the test, which is the old drill by Ken Hackathorn, and Larry Vickers has his version as well. 10 shots on a B8 target. Normally done at 10 yards for the true 10-10-10, as it's sometimes called, drill. But I like to step it back to 25 and still try to do it under the 10-second par time, because it's that, like, tell you what, if anything will show you significant deficiencies as you find that distance, because I recognize for some shooters, 25 yards, trying to do that in under 10 seconds, shots are going to be all over. And that's not going to be as nearly as helpful of telling you like what's going on. Find that distance where you can reasonably perform something like this. It might be 10 yards for you, doing the classic test, and whether you can kind of generally keep your shots in the black or close to the black on the B8 target, or 15 yards, 20 yards, just find that distance. Well, for me, running that after I hadn't been in the range in a while from 25 yards, I scored a 94 out of 100, which is very respectable in under 10 seconds on a drill like that. But if you look at my misses, Where were my misses on the target? Low left. What happened as it relates to those misses? Gun moved. I clenched, I flinched slightly as that trigger was being pressed. That's what happened, right? So what does that tell me? It tells me two things. One, I could perhaps, it may not necessarily be the answer. I may already be applying a lot of grip pressure. I could perhaps try to compensate by even further increasing grip pressure. Maybe my grip pressure has relaxed some. Maybe it's not as strong as it once was when I was shooting a lot. Whatever. Okay, it could be that. But it's also a function of how good of a job I was doing with relating. I'll tell you, even at speed, at 25 yards, you still have to do some trigger. You got to do trigger prep to make those hits count, right? And so you got to get to that wall. You got to start pushing through that wall. You got to get as close to the breaking point of that trigger, right? And then confirm your sight picture and let it go. And so what that tells me is there was a couple of shots there where I did not do that. I did not prep the trigger well enough to make those shots. And so I gave myself the time and opportunity to just move slightly. And so that's what that tells me. That's why stuff like that is a really good drill. Now, how do we work on things like this? Matthew, your thoughts? Like what are some things that you would do now you're back to the range for the first time in a while to work on your trigger?
Yeah, well, we do a couple. I know we run a couple different drills in the Guardian class that specifically work on trigger isolation type drills, right? Like we try to prep the trigger, work on drills that prep the trigger and really get you in tune with where is that trigger breaking and how much can I prep it, because I mean, if you're just dry firing, you're not getting that. You're probably not, and you haven't live fired your gun for a while. You're probably, maybe a little out of tune with where exactly that trigger's breaking. I mean, you could dry fire that all day long and really start to understand where your gun is, but there's nothing really that replaces like that live fire replication of a rapid fire drill where you're prepping the trigger in between shots. One shot is one thing, but I really like that drill where you present the gun, you're prepping the trigger, you get it to the wall, and then there's another command that says whatever the command might be to break that shot, and then you quickly come off the trigger and reset it right back to that wall. And so you're kind of ingraining that mechanical sewing machine type motion with your trigger finger that resets right away, because truthfully that's a struggle that I have sometimes, is especially if you've learned like precision shooting with rifles and things, and people tend to think to pin the trigger back to the rear, or they don't get into that idea of cycling that trigger as the gun is recoiling. And so that's a really good way to help speed up your splits, because a lot of people lose time in their splits.
Mm-hmm. So I'll throw out there, and I realize we're getting close to the hard stop that Matthew has. So this will be probably one of the this will be the last thing I say about this subject today, and maybe we'll come back to some of these things here, because I do think we can probably expand on some of these ideas as well. But two things I do relating to trigger that I like to do and requires live fire, and one is to take the eyes out of the equation, right? Because sometimes what happens is, when we are staring so intently at a target and we know where we want to hit, and we're trying to get the sights, right there, and then as soon as we see that, then we slam to the trigger. There's something about that, as the eye is feeding information to the brain, and the brain's trying to tell the trigger finger when to move and what to do. That in that process, it initiates that anticipation that's then going to follow sometimes. And so taking the eye out of the equation can be very helpful. So typically at a closer range, 3 yards is a pretty decent range on a circle about the size of a dot torture circle. So like 2.5, 3 inches, something like that. Point in on the target, get everything lined up, close the eyes. And then at that point, you're just focused on pressing the trigger, prepping it properly, getting to the wall, pressing through that wall, finding that break point, bam, setting that shot. Now, during the course while you're doing this and your eyes are closed, your hands may move the gun a little bit off target. That's true. But what I want to impress upon you as the shooter, as the student, let's say, is to pay attention to what you're feeling with the trigger, not necessarily what you're seeing. Because the eyes sometimes can kind of override what we feel in the hand or in the finger. And so just closing the eyes. So even if you hit or not, it doesn't matter. And tell you what, for max effect, take 3 or 4 shots, maybe 5 shots in a row. Because regardless if you drift off target a little bit, those shots typically, provided there's not major issues with your grip, are going to be grouped pretty much together or close to. And what that'll show a shooter a lot of times is they pay attention to what they're doing at the trigger, as they feel that trigger a little bit more than what they maybe are normally accustomed to, is that's going to improve their ability to press through that trigger without moving the gun. Number 2 is put the eyes back into the equation, but you put all of that focus, energy, and effort into looking at and watching what the trigger is doing. And so actually not aiming at anything in particular, just making sure you're in a safe direction, pointing at a berm. You don't have to have a target for this, but turning the gun sideways and in front of your face. Watch your trigger finger press the trigger and try to see and feel all the different stages of that trigger, where the wall occurs at, where the break actually occurs at, all of that stuff, and walk yourself through that process while you're watching it, because that can further enhance your learning of what's going on with your trigger as you're pressing it. And then our goal is, when we combine that with looking at a target, looking through our sights, trying to put an accurate shot on target, we want to feel that same experience occurring with the trigger. And that's going to help us avoid the clinch, is like what I often call it. So that would be some things that you can do at the live range to learn your trigger better. Properly prepping it when you need to make good, precise shots will make a big difference for you in being able to actually hit those shots. So anyway, all right, that's all I got. Matthew, last words as we got to say goodbye?
No, man, words of wisdom all the time, man. You telling us a lot of your secrets, so that's good, man.
Secrets, yes. Better start charging for the podcast now.
Yeah.
So thanks for doing the episode with me today, bro.
Yeah, thank you, man.
Good stuff, man. And hopefully you all listening got some value from this today that you can take away and go work on. And you know what? Hit us up with any questions or stuff that you have, including if you have questions about your shooting or this or that. You know what? You can always contact us at podcast@concealedcarry.com. We love interacting with our listeners and hearing from you. Thank you so much for those of you that do write into us. Today's episode is brought to you by mountainmanmedical.com and also Mantis X, which you can buy at concealedcarry.com/Mantis X. We thank you for joining with us in today's episode, for being a part of it with us, and we bid you adieu. And until next time, train right, train often, and train safe, so you can fight hard, fight fast, and fight true. Take care. And we're off, and Matthew's got to go do his thing. So, peace out, everybody. Thanks for being with us today.
Thanks.
All right, see you, buddy.
Bye.
And I'm still live. So I actually just taking one last look here at comments. Let's see. Good stuff. Guys, I'm glad you enjoyed the show. Thank you so much. Nicholas, David, Brad, Cammie, Thomas, David. David says, tried the blindfold presentation shoot drill. In fact, Shoot Ready Challenge, by the way, which is going to release, I think, later today or tomorrow morning for the month of May, is actually going to be very similar to what you're talking about there, David. It is essentially a blindfold type drill that I do with Laser X. It's a good one. So you want to check out shooterreadychallenge.com to see that one when it publishes here, probably in a few hours, I think, is when it's going live. So, guys, thanks for being here again. We'll see you next week. Monday's got Shop Talk. Tuesday, more podcast. And of course, Thursday as well next week with the show as well. Thanks, guys. Take care. We'll see you.